had you ever even seen a Bible, for example?
No. Bible was like a magic book. Within one day, we're now democratic society.
One day, just boom.
Just boom, you know?
Whoa.
And then every one of us at that time was thinking that within 2 or 3 years, we'll be like Switzerland. Because now it said, okay, the problem was just communism. Now the communism is not anymore. Everything will be great. I said, God, if you are there, please do something for me because I am losing my soul, my life, everything. I don't know what I will do. When I heard about the cross, the work on the cross and why he did that, I said 2 things. Such love no one can have than God, other than God. And the one that did this must be only God and no one else.
So, Saimir, I've been wanting to do this interview for a long time. I remember seeing a YouTube comment come across on one of our videos or something from someone who said they were from Albania. And I didn't know much about Albania, and so I had to look it up on the map. Turns out that's quite the place, and you have quite the story. And here we are a number of years later, and we want to get that story today. So tell me about yourself. Where did you grow up? What was childhood like? And you're from Albania still to this day, which is really neat. We're able to meet here in Switzerland, actually, to do this interview. So yeah, let's start with that. Tell me about yourself.
Well, Albania, for most of the people, is an unknown country, or I should say it was unknown before the war in Kosovo in late 90s. It's a small country. That's why, probably. Or because it has always been between historically between 2 civilizations, West civilization and East civilization. It is situated just 70 kilometers by sea from Italy and in north of Greece. It's a small country with history, I think because of its position geographically. It has been always under the influence of some great empires during the centuries. So I was born and raised in Tirana, in capital of Albania, at the time where Albanians were governed by a communist state in 1974. And very nice childhood for me, and even we remember, people from my generation will remember as a very golden time, if I can say it like this, because we didn't know what was going on with adults, but we were safe. We were playing on the streets. We had so little to play with, and our happiness could just, could start with just only one little thing more. So that's how I remember that time. Although our parents were working, normal work, 8 hours a day. Families, neighbors, even, state institutions would care of the children of that time. So it was very good. We remember that as a wonderful time until we entered in our teen age, and that started to look differently.
So I was doing some research after I met you for the first time a couple of years ago. I met you on a different trip, and I was looking into Albania. It has been called by some historians the North Korea of Europe. It was considered the most strict of all the communist countries. Yeah. Especially as you get older and you start realizing what that's like. Yeah, tell me a bit of what that was like, living in such a strict environment a communist environment, obviously religion would have been very minimal, I'm assuming. And yeah, tell me more of that.
First of all, you should get up in the morning, as a teenager, at 3 o'clock in the morning.
3?
Yes.
Oh my. Okay.
And go to the, I'm talking about 80s, 1980s. You had to go to the shop and to place there an empty bottle or stone or whatever as a sign of your place in the row, because at 6:30 in the morning or 7, the milk would come and everybody was fighting for a bottle of milk. So then you start to realize something. This was, from a personal or everyday experience of a teenager. But then you get the information that in the border there's an electric fence, and nobody could go out and nobody could come in. Literally an electric fence. So then they would tell you that, and they will raise you through education systems that you must be true, you must be, with a high standard of character. But then when you tell the truth, your people in your family will shut you down. They'll say, hey, what are you doing? Don't tell this anymore to anyone. So you realize that there is oppressive, big, powerful beast, which is state, and then there's hypocrisy all over in the population. You start to realize that, after you come out from the childhood. So it was like, people just mentioning the name of God, just mentioning that could go in jail.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah. So
people were spying each other all the time. Brothers would spying each other. Marriage. Couples in marriage couples would not have faith, would not share the most inner thoughts they had. It was a depersonalized process of by the state.
Was it almost like you lived in a constant state of fear then? Don't say the wrong thing.
As an adult, all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. I had the privilege, I don't know how, but it happened. But it happened that I was in a class at the area close to my school, in my elementary school. My school was at the area where were close what is called the block area, which was the area where these leaders of the party lived, including the dictator, our dictator, Enver Hoxha. So it happened that they brought their children in a public school. That's what they used to do. So I had the niece of the dictator in my class. And she every spring, she had her birthday, and she invited classmates. I was included, although I was a son of workers, which was not usual. But because I had some, I was kind of a leader of boys, so she invited me. And so every year for some years, I had the opportunity to go at the house of the dictator. So,
no way.
Yes.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Sorry, what was the dictator's name?
Enver Hoxha.
Hoxha.
That was his name.
Hoxha. Okay.
Yeah. So
wow.
Yeah. So it was 1988, I think, and he was already dead, but he was succeeded by another one. But his family was very, very strong. His wife was still, So I remember I had a cassette at the time. That's how we listened music at that time. It was called cassette. I had a cassette, and I wanted to bring it to this party. And my father was angry And he didn't tell me why. He later told me he was afraid that they will accuse him if something would happen there, that, oh, this cassette, you got, who brought this? So he forbidden me to the cassette. And I remember going on the road to the block area where the house of the dictator was. It was with, guarded with soldiers. And there I saw, before going there, in a soccer field, there were two young guys listening to radio. I think they were a little bit drunk because they did it openly, and they were listening Western music. And then out of nowhere, some people from the buildings around, they were running. I saw that they were running toward these guys to catch them and started to beat them. And then I realized that they before that they called the police. So 2 or 3 police cars came and took them like they were really bad criminals. And it was a manifestation of the strictness of that of the state. And I was entering. I saw this scene while I was walking toward and when I entered in the house of the dictator, in the big room, it was like a great palace for us. I was a little bit late because I was watching the scene there. And then when I entered there, it was, my friends were dancing, hard rock music, heavy metal music, music of that year, which was recorded and published in West. So I said, something is wrong here. These guys are beaten on the street, but here in the house of the dictator, they're doing, party with hard rock and heavy metal music. And I thought just that, and then I started to have a party with them. But I remember that as a teenager, saying, "Oh, something is wrong here."
That is incredibly ironic.
Yes, it is.
And that's what's so confusing to me about Albania. I read the history of that country and the environment you grew up in, and it feels so bizarre, like terribly bizarre. I think you told me this when we had a phone call before this interview, that Albania is the only country ever in their constitution to say we will be atheist, or we are an atheist country. Do you elaborate on that?
I don't know another country who
I wasn't able to find one. Yeah, it's maybe someone can fact check us.
Even
on
North
that,
Korea, they're not.
Even North Korea. So, but tell me what they did with that, just so people understand the context here.
Well, as soon as the Second World War ended, the Albanian communists were held by Yugoslavian communists at that time, and Russian communists, and to come into power. And the big guys decided, Stalin, Churchill, Roosevelt, that they decided that Albania would be a part of the eastern side of Iron Curtain. So at the beginning, they allowed religion in Albania because it was so cultural, it was so nominal, it was a folkloric religion. It has always been like this in Albania because, I said, in the midst of the two civilizations, and I think nobody, cares about that village in the border, but that's how we survived. I think we developed, which is a bad thing and a good thing for us at the same time. We developed a habit of adaptation, of being adapted, to anyone who is in power and who wants to come and exercise that power. Okay, let's do it. So we had in North Catholic population. In the mid cities and areas, we have Islam and we have Muslims, predominantly. And on the south, we have Christian Eastern Orthodox. And we have also a big group. I'm talking about 2 million people. Huh? very, very, very few people comparing to other countries. But in the there is also a great population with another religion, which is an order of Islam. It's called Baptist. So when they came, because it was just nominal, communism could go easily and didn't find any resistance.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, many people say it was a patriotism, but I think differently.
Mm.
So they had not a problem with that. But in the beginning, they persecuted Catholic priests, because they were somehow involved in politics. There were most of the intellectuals and people who were, teachers, and they had a lot of influence on the northern part of Albania. So they killed them in the beginning. They persecuted, Catholic priests and monks that were there. But after that, they in '67, they decided to erase religion wipe out any kind of religion from Albania. Politically, in political context, because it has always been a small country, they were helped in the beginning by Yugoslavs, then they broke with them, and then by Russians, and then we broke with them, and they ended up being helped by Chinese Communist Party. So far, so how we show our loyalty to the Chinese Party? Let's do a cultural revolution. So what should we do about cultural revolution? Oh, we have religion, and the communist atheist ideology doesn't.
Wow.
It's against religion. Its country is opposite to religion. So let's show our loyalty to Chinese people by erasing religion.
That's like weird and bizarre. I mean, that's terrifying, actually.
Yeah.
So we're talking a very anti-God environment.
Yeah.
Here. And so what did they do then? You're talking about they were killing Christians or persecuting Christians. You're saying in 1967 and on, how they're siding with China. What did they do to have this cultural revolution? It sounds so communist to call it that, I guess. I mean, that sounds like something that you would call it a cultural revolution. In reality, it's like eradicating, religion, essentially.
Just for the sake of,
to look good to the others
who are on Far East. Because they were feeding us, at that time.
I was reading about that a little bit. There was a lot of food imports coming because Albania was in a bad condition, and they needed the food.
And never succeeded to that, Although after we broke with Chinese, they said, "Oh, we will provide for ourselves," But they never. And it was not for technical reasons. But yes, they did like all politicians do. They said, "I'm not the hand who will do that." So there were some young guys, boys and girls, that had this idea, a revolutionary idea, that religion belongs to past, and it's it's something is not for the modern life and the progress that we're living, and especially for communist ideology. We are looking forward to.
We're looking to the future, right? We don't want religion because it's in the past.
We're looking
How about that?
A utopian society. So religion is a stumble block. So let's get rid of that. And they started to talk and raise their voice and ask the state to do something about this. They even, by their own initiative, went to the churches and put down the buildings, and then after that, what can we do? It's a communist revolution. It's part of a communist revolution. So let's eradicate everything, even mentioning the name of God. So it was a society run by police.
Like a police
mentality,
state.
police state. It was
Yeah.
not. It was not at all the country.
See, this is so interesting because even in your most strict other communist countries, Soviet Union, the North Korea, even today would still say, oh well, we'll let one Catholic church be open over here, just so we're not to make it look good. Oh, we're not quote unquote, we're not persecuting the Christians, which obviously they are, but Albania wasn't even trying to be subtle at this point. They're just like, there are no options for religion here. Yeah.
Yeah, but I know even in North Korea, I know there are churches there, run by communists.
If you go on Google Maps, you can even find them. They've been pinned and stuff.
Yeah, and some friends they have been there. They say you go there and you understand they are actors. There are some men and women actors. Head covering even in Catholic or Protestant and the preacher is a communist guy.
But so it's so interesting because it's all an act. But yet, what are they trying to prove? I guess it's trying to say, oh, well, we're not that anti-religion. Whereas your country at that point was saying, we're not even trying to hide this. We're just going to eradicate this completely.
Yes. It was for the sake of, and he could do that. Our dictator, he could do that, with this, at the state of the country that was at that time, historically, coming from this adaptation all the time, I think anyone could do. Unfortunately, I'm not glad to say that. I'm not happy to say that, but they could do that, and that they succeeded. They succeeded. They raised a generation of atheists. Well, I think now it was not really a bad thing because they wiped out all false religion. So
wow.
Because
this isn't just they're targeting Christianity; they're targeting all religion.
Yes,
anything
that that relates to God or to spirituality, anything, and that was a very for me it was an advantage, a missed advantage in early 90s. But it was an advantage, and now we have a generation of my father, for example, of my parents. They are atheists. But immediately after the communism fell, the next day they were ashamed to say they are atheists. Oh, because it's related to communism.
Oh, okay, I see. So if you're talking living in a police state, eradicating all religion, you mentioned how if you even said the name of God or talked about it, that would be a huge problem. You could go to jail even,
yes,
which is very aggressive. I guess someone would report you to the police.
Yeah. Spying was a part of the culture.
And I was also looking this up too. Like you talk about how the whole country is surrounded by electric fence. Well, you have the ocean on one side, but then you had electric fence on the land borders, heavily fortified border. And I found very few cases where people were able to escape through that wall. Is that true? Or maybe I want to make sure I'm getting that right. But whereas the Berlin Wall, a lot more people were able to get through the Iron Curtain.
Comparing to that, many people were killed on the border. Very few people succeeded.
Did you ever know of anybody that tried to escape?
Oh, yes, I know some people, a teacher, and they teacher in elementary school, and he pretended to go for excursion in the area, but he was close to the border, and he escaped. It was in late 80s, before it was more difficult. But they were afraid also that when they would go, some of them, they were unfortunately brought back from Yugoslavia or from Greece, I think. So a human being has the ability, and it's fascinating how it has the ability to, to convince himself that you can live like this. And you can find it's fascinating for me. People found joy in everyday life, found some things to enjoy in everyday life. They were laughing. I remember my family, my cousins. They were laughing. They were enjoying some very, very few things that they had. They were enjoying, relationships. Although it was very dangerous within your family, or within your relatives to talk about these things. It was prohibited, but still they found out. It makes me think of today, how much complaint is of not having enough in order to be happy or to enjoy things or to laugh or to stay with people. And it really, when I think of that time, I say, are humans the same or not?
I mean, you're describing getting up at 3:00 in the morning to get in the queue to get milk for the day.
Yeah, and you go there and you have fun with your. On the one side, like I said, on the one side you understand something is wrong, but then you say, hey, you accept that. How able is a human being to accept things? Good at that. Things.
Humans are very adaptable.
Yeah, very adaptable. Which is can be a good thing and a bad thing.
I think you told me though on the phone as an example how someone had went on a trip out of Albania, like on a visa or whatever, and had brought like a Coca-Cola back or something. I think, was it a Coca-Cola?
Oh, or they found it there.
Yeah, and how that was so significant to have something like that because you just did not have that.
That's another sad side of this story. When I remember myself, or I remember my people whom they would put just a little thing that was coming from outside. There were some drivers of the big trucks bringing things, and they were the lucky ones for us because they could buy a pair of jeans, or they would bring soap, just a soap from outside, from the West, or a can of Coke, and they would go to the other relatives and give them as a gift, and it was a great honor.
Wow!
And they would put them on the furniture for decoration of the house. So that also developed a hunger for just a little bit thing from outside.
As in, there's a world out there.
Yes.
And we can't access it.
Yes. It was a prison. It was a big prison.
I was reading a historian that had done a lot of work in Albania, and I think he used a phrase something along the lines of Albania was a giant prison state.
Yes.
Or one of the truest examples of a actual prison state.
Yeah.
Just how strict it was.
Yes, but it was interesting. The tourists that came, they remember. They said it was so beautiful. It was so quiet. It was so. It reminds me also of North Korea. I have friends that they have been there. They say it's not like they say it is. It's quiet. People are smiling. People are working. People are enjoying life. It's not like they say, wow. It's because of the ability of the human being to act. That's all,
Well, and also it being quiet, and not having a lot of traffic noise, probably because people didn't own cars either. Did y'all have?
No. Just bicycles and
really.
That's all. We're not allowed. Just
you weren't allowed to own a vehicle.
No. We were not allowed.
Why not?
We're not allowed. Well, there was something that it's something that it's coming from the Western type of life.
Okay.
We didn't own also our houses.
You didn't own your house.
There was was the ideology. So everything belongs to everyone, but it's running by the state.
Okay, so this is classic Karl Marx, right? Where he writes in the Communist Manifesto, eradication of all private property, essentially. And that's what you had.
Yes, even the apartments became, we became owners of our apartments after communism fell.
So theoretically, they could tell you to move and you had to move from your apartment if you didn't own it.
They would come and even didn't tell you, the truck would come and say, hey, load your things, and then especially for the ones that were brought for political reasons to other areas.
Did that ever happen to you?
No.
Where you had to move?
No. That was not common. That was not common. But they could, do that, and you could.
That is wild. See, obviously, I'm from America, so like this is completely alien to think of not owning the house I live in.
Yeah,
when they came, so hard to even get my to understand that.
Yeah, when they came in power, you had a 2-store building or 2 house, and then would just come and say, "Hey, there are these 4 other families that will live with you.
Wow.
So you go to this room, and the other will live here." So that's what they did.
That's so different. That's hard
in the name of the people.
Yeah. Isn't that always what it was, right? Like this is it's such a bizarre mixture that lasted for so long with such a level of intensity of like you're saying, spying and policing and you cannot leave.
One generation.
Yeah, entire generation. So you are raised in this, and you're in a place that's pretty systematically eradicated religion. Did you have any concept of Christianity, God, Jesus? Like, did that mean anything to you growing up in those years, up until communism fell? Talk to me about that.
No, when I was raised as with a atheistic ideology.
Mm-hmm.
Everything happened because of evolution. But now we are lucky. We've been lucky to someone. It came to his mind these communist ideologies. So now we found the path, the right path for the humanity. So let's move ahead. Let's do everything in order to achieve that goal. So that was until mid 80s. But then, becoming a teenager, that thing changed. And Christianity became something that was connected with the West.
So you had heard of it and things.
Yes, but
you just didn't know anything about it.
No. There was not the gospel preaching. There were some. There were some attempts by some people from outside that were coming as tourists, and they were trying to leave like a pamphlet here or there, or even throw Bibles in plastic sacks on the sea, to travel, to the coast.
Did it work? Like, was it successful?
I heard some stories that it worked. Some people had that. Some people in Albania, they kept their religion hiddenly, but still, it became more a mystical thing than it was a religion, And it mixed with the superstitious, folkloric things. So we didn't have any clear understanding of, this religion says this, religion says that, and not at all. It was mixed. Christianity was mixed with Western world, and Islam was mixed with Turkey.
Oh, okay.
And that's all. Because Turkish Ottoman Empire, invaded Albania for 500 years.
Whoa.
And so that's why we have a lot in common with them.
Yeah.
So that was the idea.
But it's not like you had ever, had you ever even seen a Bible, for example?
No. Bible was like a magic book, it was a mystery, just mentioning the name of the Bible was something like, it was a book for magicians. That's how my friends, when they were talking about, they have a Injil, they have It was interesting because we had because we are an ancient, population, and we had a lot of history, and then some of the artifacts in our history talk about Christianity, and communists didn't. They needed that to prove that we're a very ancient nation. Because otherwise they would Serbs or Yugoslavians or Russians, they will just, and also a part of this international ideology of communism paradoxically was also the nationalism, so they try to raise this feeling of nationalism in order to gather people around, we are doing this for the nation. So because of that, they kept safe these artifacts, but they were New Testament, for example, of the I don't know, 11th century, or I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but
that's kind of bizarre. But I guess they let that slide because that's the history of Albania. But like, if you were to go get a New Testament and try to read it, that would be a real problem.
It would be the end of your life and your family, not only your life.
Really?
Yes.
So so let's say somehow someone floats a Bible across the ocean in a plastic bag like you described, whatever, and you were to pick it up and read it, and have it, and they were to discover that. You're saying you would lose your life over.
You're now
probably
an enemy of the state, and you will never rehabilitated. You will never be, a normal citizen. Your family, they had to shun you as a member of their family, and even if they do that, they don't know if that will succeed, if they will be successful.
Okay, because so then they would end up being punished potentially.
Yes,
for that.
So it was an ideology mixed with a, how can I say, tribal, a way of doing things.
Yeah.
So cultic. I mean, Enver Hoxha was not anymore a leader. He was God. He knew everything. His works started from how to educate children in kindergarten to how to, manage retirement and how to, the industry, how it works, the science, the art. He would talk about everything, and everybody was like the dictator in North Korea now.
I was going to say, it sounds really familiar, right? Where he's kind of like the leader of North Korea right now, Kim Jong-un, right? Where it's like he knows everything, and he's almost venerated as God, but yet they're supposed to be like atheists. So it's kind of weird, right? But I wonder if this is going to, humans do kind of want to worship something, right? They're looking for something, and so you're describing them trying to find it in the state or in nationalism or in the dictator or, even relationships. They're trying to find meaning through these other things.
Yeah.
Because what else do you have, I guess?
Yes.
Yes.
They in the middle of Tirana is still there now as it was after he died, they built it a pyramid. It's a building that from up you can see it has the shape of an eagle, which is a national symbol of Albania. But when you go down and you see that, it's a pyramid, and there was the pharaoh under that pyramid. So that was a museum for him. And
interesting.
Yeah. So he was worshipped. I think he was worshipped as a god. Of course, there were some people in Albania. I mean, few people in Albania that they understood things, and but even them, they had to do that. They have to act like that. So it was a false god worship in a false everyday liturgic way.
Like, it's describing a world where everything is kind of a lie.
It's a lie, yeah.
Yeah.
And you get used to that, and you
learn to live with it. Yeah.
It's so pitiful. It's so sad,
That's
in the end.
Because ultimately a system like that could only last but so long, right? Before the cracks begin to form in the foundation, so to speak.
Yeah,
It has to, right?
It collapsed everywhere.
Yeah. Which I'm really curious about that, because Berlin Wall comes down in 89, Soviet Union dissolves in 1991. When does communism fall in Albania? It would have been right in that
1991.
time. 91. Okay.
And it was one of the last countries that, communism fell. And I'm convinced of what happened. This is my opinion, it's my conviction, that the communists, once they, watched what happened with Ceausescu, the leader in Romania, they killed him.
Yeah, he was executed, right? Yeah.
So they decided to lead the democratization process of Albania,
so that they wouldn't get punished or killed. Yeah.
And they said, okay, let's do it slowly, without any damage, and not putting Albanians against Albanians. So they formed two parties. One is left wing and the other is right wing, run by communists. So they are now promoting for 35 years the democracy. And the lie continues in a different way.
Okay.
With a country that says we're free now to think.
Interesting.
We're not a police state anymore.
Okay.
But I would describe it as a still post-communist country,
There's still elements of that are still there even now then.
Yes. I mean, it's not outside. You'd see, this is a, if you come there, this is a Western country, everything is with some influential of Eastern cultural things, elements, but still there, we are aiming to go in Europe, but with the same mentality, the same.
But like,
just my opinion.
What a weird.
I wish I was wrong. But I'm wrong. But.
Yeah, like to live through that transition from being this incredibly strict communist country to, well, I'm guessing they took the electric fence down and, it allowed you to have private property again. And
yeah,
what was that transition phase like? That must have been a strange thing to live through.
Yeah, shocking thing.
Yeah.
Within one day, we're now democratic society.
One day, just boom.
Just boom,
Whoa.
And then we changed the laws. And so every one of us at that time was thinking that within 2 or 3 years, we will be like Switzerland. If someone would say, no, it's not, we need 5 or 6 years, we would we would laugh at him. Because now we said, okay, the problem was just communism. Now the communism is not anymore. Everything will be great. So that's why I was in my high school. I was watching for some years the only one channel television that we had, state television. There were musicians playing there, but we were also watching television, and we were started to listen, music from the West. And then immediately I grabbed the guitar and gathered a band in my high school. And so we performed in 1991 at the first festival. It is still today a national festival. It's a big one, a big music event in December, every December. So we went there in 1991 with a song with this title, "I Dream." So the lyrics were about, we dream to be far away now from the disappointment or the pain, and we dream to be like stars in heaven. So let's continue this kind of walk to become a star. Because my idea was that these stars, music stars, movie stars, politicians, and this kind of, so in the West, they were the ones that were representing joy and happiness that lacked in our country. So let's become all, if it's possible, movie stars, music stars. And let's become, So that was, and guess what? We won the first prize. It was a little bit strange because we were dressed like Beatles in 1991, okay? But the clock of the Albanians with music, and then it stopped at that year.
Because wow. Yeah, so, like that must have been disorienting to go through this experience. Like, I can't even imagine. Yeah. And so that happens. Suddenly, hey, we have some freedom here. Yeah. At what point does religion come into the scene, both for you and just in society, where, hey, it's okay to talk about God now. Hey, here's a Bible and I can read it. Did that happen pretty quickly?
Yes. So missionaries flooded Albania from the West. And on the streets, you could see, crowds of people fighting with each other to grab a Bible. Now,
really?
Yes. Stadiums, with this evangelistic, events, halls, everywhere, and churches started to, Catholic Church, they reestablished Eastern Orthodox, so they reestablished Muslim community. They, started to open some mosques, and evangelical, Christians. They came from the West, and they were amazed with the kind of interest Albanian had. Now we understand that at that time was mixed with, spiritual interest you didn't know. You didn't know now. It was a spiritual interest or just a curiosity or a flashy interest about things that these people represent. They present wealth. They present materialism. They present things that we don't have, that we long for, that we acted all the time in order to have just a piece of that. So now they are coming, and they can be the channel of this. So
wow,
to have that.
Wow. So you could have religion almost being a carrier for a culture that the Albanians maybe had wanted. Coming out of communism, say we want to be more like the West, capitalism, this, that, whatever, and religion is just one of the many pieces that we'll try out.
Yes. Well, I don't blame too much missionaries because I don't think they could understand at that time. But, well, if when North Korean will be open, I think I know what will happen.
Probably pretty similar to what you experienced then, right?
Yes.
Because what happens in there is, if I remember correctly, so you have Albania gets flooded with missionaries, religion, things like that. But yet, if you look at the numbers today, Albania is very few evangelical Christian.
Well,
very, very little.
Yes.
It's actually considered by Joshua Project as part of the 1040 window, as in like one of the most unreached countries. As far as like they don't have the gospel, they're unreached with the gospel, even though maybe they heard, but there aren't believers there.
Yes.
So it's tragic.
We're still doing the same thing, being remembered for unique things. Because, the decline of Christianity in the West as mainstream, I'm talking about mainstream Christianity, there needed some time, some 100 years. In Albania, the decline from what is called a spiritual awakening after the communism fell, the decline is within 35 years. It's a very short period of time.
Barely made a generation. Didn't even make a generation before it.
No, it didn't make the generation. We see the children of the first generation of Christians. They are just in a very bad situation.
So where does that
spiritually?
Where does that put you in this story? So you're living through so many changes. You're coming from a very strict communist setting, no understanding of Christianity, the Bible, God, anything.
Yeah.
The Berlin Wall falls and communism falls and all this happens. Suddenly you're flooded with religion, Western music, you're starting to, you have a band, all this stuff. Where does Christianity come into the picture for you? Like, were you one of those early ones that said, I want to be a Christian, or did it take a lot longer for you to come to that point?
Yeah, no, I didn't come to faith by just, choosing that was the best life, best offer. Because, my generation, we always say, my friends, we it seems like we lived 3 or 4 lives because of these radical changes until I found the real life. But the way I was caught by my Lord was that through the road of desperation, because our band became well known, and I thought, oh, this is what should I do all my life? Just create a 3-minute song, and then people will love you, people will clap their hands for you, and you'll be happy all the time. But immediately the second song and the third song started to become more darker and darker and darker, because I realized that, started to realize, even me and as my friends, not only me, that this was a new type of lie, was not something that fulfilled the soul and the life of a human being. You see things like I said, communists running democratization process.
That's ironic.
People, started to fight for, now individualism started, and people started to fight for very, very little things, killings and gangs and all these kind of things. And you say, oh, well, we didn't thought about that. What about this now?
So it's like, it's easy at that point to say, oh, communism is the problem. And then when communism goes away, it's like, wait, there's still problems.
Yes.
Was that what happened?
But we thought differently. We said, that's communism is the problem. Now that is, and you're still disappointed.
That makes sense, because, humans can be pretty mean and, pretty evil, right? And so, like, if you have fallen humanity, but there's still humans in the picture of what you're describing, and so you're starting to see there's some dark, like you're saying, that the next song becomes darker and then darker and then darker.
Yes. And I was kind of started to search, and then my song started to become more as a spiritual, search for the meaning of life.
You're starting to look a lot deeper now.
Yeah,
right?
I started to talk about. I started to have existential questions. Where happiness lies, or I started to ask about meaning of life. So, but I didn't have any answer. So I was more desperate and desperate, until one day, when I was 27, in 1999, I said, God, if you are there, please do something for me, because I am losing my soul, my life, everything. I don't know what I will do from now on. Christians for me were just weak people who couldn't handle the life well. And that's why they were gathered together.
Yeah, like they used it as some kind of crutch in life or something.
As a defense way of, so they were not, they were falling stars, they were not the ones who wanted to be and could be stars and live a happy life. So that's why they were gathering together. But I was in very, very low moment in my life, very desperate. Outside, everything was okay. People they didn't recognize anything, my family. and my friends, and I acted very well, but inside I was totally broken. So for the first time, I was in my room, and I asked God, if you are there, just show me something, because you're the last hope. I don't know who you are. They say you're good. Just show me something good. And I didn't listen a loud voice, or I didn't saw a flashlight, nothing like this. But something happened which wake me up immediately after I did this profane prayer request. I didn't know, I just made, but it was sincere. It was from the bottom of my heart. It was like someone else was in the room and had the medicine of the soul, or had the button of pushing off and on the soul. And then he made possible for me to have an immediate peace in my heart, which was even weird for me, How can I? So I understood that I was not the owner of my soul, And then I said, I even tried as a perverted human being to go back, because I said, probably this is not true. This is just my mouth. The game of my brain is out to just. I couldn't go back in that desperation. And the more I couldn't, the more I was amazed, that there is someone else in this room. And finally, I surrendered. I said, you are here. I recognize you are here. And I'm amazed, it was like, it was the first time, encountering God, having this, it was kind of although it is not the right depiction, but it was kind of open the channel between earth and sky, and I was so glad. But at the same time, something a big problem followed. Who's God? Because there are a lot of books, a lot of people that say God is this, God is that. I promised him. I said in my room that day, I said, I'm gonna grab you, your robe. That's what I was imagining. I go and I will follow you all of my life. But then I said, well, but who you are? So I started to seek and to search for who's the real God, who is the real one that will represent him on earth. And as I said, no, I didn't say that, but we were a Muslim background. Our family has a Muslim background.
Okay.
Yeah, although they were atheists. Yeah, because they were ashamed of
Okay.
As I said, they were ashamed of connection, saying we're atheists in the early 90s. And the next day, everybody in Albania said, "Oh, what was my father? Catholic.
And then that's
Catholic.
what you are.
Yeah, I am a Catholic, or I am Muslim. I am without any particular conviction." But then we had Quran there, and nobody read it in our furniture. So I took Quran and I read it for 1 year, verse by verse.
Wow.
And I ended it. My plan was to finish Quran and then read the Bible. So I was finishing that. I was for a theater festival in Cairo, in Egypt, in 2001, in September 2001. So I was there when the Twin Towers crawled down, and then I saw the joy of the people in the streets in Cairo. And I said, okay, definitely I'm going to go back and read the Bible.
That must have been a strange thing to witness.
Yes, it was.
Wow.
So I understood.
Okay. Was that really eye-opening? What about that really stuck with you?
While reading Quran, I understood that the biggest the point, the big change between, biggest thing that changes between two books was Jesus.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
but when I saw the
Wow.
joy of the people there, and reading about God, and He's merciful, and talking about the mercy of God all the time, and then see that application on the streets of Cairo, I said, I'm gonna definitely, when I go back, I'm gonna ask. So I asked a Bible to a Christian friend,
Yeah.
that we used to tease him, once in a while. And then when I asked him, I said, and he was very glad, happy, and he gave me the Bible. But the Bible was much thicker than Quran. So I said,
Oh yeah.
I'm not gonna read this all,
Okay.
because I will not. My life is not. I will not have enough days to read all the religious books. So I went to the Christians, and I asked them about Jesus. And my question was a classical one about Trinity, why you say Son of God. But they shared the gospel with me. I was 1 year seeking for the truth, for the true God. When I listened and I heard the gospel, I immediately knew who was at that day in my room. Because when I heard about the cross, the work on the cross, and why He did that, I said two things. Such love no one can have than God, other than God. And the one that did this must be only God and no one else. So I said to them, what should I do if I accept Jesus? They said, oh, you should do nothing, which is another story. But for me, nothing at that time didn't mean that, oh, I'm just taking a ticket to heaven. I was so grateful to that nothing for me meant, I understood that He didn't made any condition to jump on His boat, but another story, how you continue that journey. But I was so amazed by His love. It was totally new to me, never heard about that. Although I saw some movies, I saw Jesus. It was, probably the greatest hero of humanity. But I didn't understand, what He did and why He did. And then I understood I was okay. I was 1 year that I was okay with accepting being a sinful creature, having mistakes. And now my idea was, well, how to relate to the real God, So, and then I gave my life to Him. I said, oh, now I know whose name, what is your name, that you came 1 year before in my room. You're Jesus, so I'm going to follow you for the rest of my days. So that's how it started my journey. Yeah, and my girlfriend at that time, which is my wife today, our romantic conversation during the whole year turned into theological conversation. But she started to have questions about. She came from a different road to the same conclusion, and then same decision. And then we started to frequent a brethren church in Tirana. And it was good. It was very good in the beginning because they were emphasizing the importance of the Word of God, and to understand that, to walk your life after the Word, and and they were at that time they were doing some things very differently from other churches around, and it seemed to me that they're doing what God is commanding in His Word, so we are safe. We're in a safe boat here. Yeah, but the boat started to have holes during the journey. So
when you first get that Bible, Had you read much of it before you became a Christian? Like, how much had you read at that point?
Yeah, I read Genesis. It was the same. I mean, not all the same, but it was things that I already read in Quran. I read some stories from the Gospel of John, but it was not, that I went there because I had questions from the Bible. My question was clear in my mind. Just tell me about
Interesting.
Jesus.
Yeah. You were going straight, it was like you're trying to go straight to the core of this challenge.
Yes.
And figure out, what do I do with that's so
I
interesting.
I forgot Trinity. When they shared the gospel with me, I totally forgot Trinity.
Was the Trinity an issue for you originally, by the way?
No.
That can be a challenge for some people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But I forgot it, because I was amazed. I realized, I made the connection, of what happened during that day with the work of Jesus, and the life of Jesus, and who Jesus is. So I was so amazed about that I forgot, theological,
But I think that's an important point. That's why I wanted to come back to it, because it seems to me at the core of all of this is this deep question of, okay, I'm trying to figure out essentially, meaning of life, purpose, that kind of thing, but also who is Jesus, and trying to answer that question. And when I have these conversations with people, it seems like it's usually not some grand theological explanation of the Trinity or the perfect logic and rationale of here's why God is real. Here's why you must believe the Bible because all these facts, It seems like it more comes back to that question of, like, when you go to your friends, who's Jesus? Tell me about this, and I'm going to start thinking about this, and we're really digging into who is Jesus and what am I going to do about it, essentially. I don't know. Respond to that. How does that connect?
Well, it's when we see when we see Philip the evangelist approaching to the eunuch, and there's a combination of some elements. You need to have someone who is seeking. I never, in my experience at least, I never witnessed a moment when someone was not searching for God, not searching for reality, and then you go and share the gospel with him or with her, and they say, "Oh," and they immediately converted. No, there must be someone who is realize some need for the truth, and someone who will show Jesus by explaining things to their mind but also these two elements must be also connected with the element of revelation. I think a revelation of what God is doing in the person who is going to be converted. So there are these three elements. So revelation of like the presence of God in some way, the way he knows how he does these things, and the person who is interested, and then the messenger that goes there and does the final work. So sometimes the messenger is just, sometimes even he's not interested so much in that. Just he's doing his job, and it works.
Yeah. Okay. I see that, and I think that's a lesson though for all of us to. Are we willing to be that messenger?
Yeah.
To carry the message to those that, in your case, you had questions. You're like, I'm not sure what to do about this.
Yeah.
But you needed that person to say, let me get you started on that journey, or if that makes sense, to help talk through those questions.
Yeah.
And
sometimes the messenger is really, zealous and willing to do that. I have tested, proven this, or I have experienced this in my life. But there is no interest on the person's side. So so it doesn't work, and this must not be a discouragement for us, because there are different ingredients that must be combined in order for a person to move from death to life or darkness to light. It's not spiritual.
It's not a recipe that if you do this same thing every time, it'll work for everybody. No. Everybody's different. Yeah. So tell me, let's jump to more present day. Can you tell me about the church community you're part of today and the church in Albania? I mean, we had said earlier how there's very little Christian presence in Albania today. That's almost like this sharp, like you said, 35 years, how it's just sharp cliff almost of decline for Christianity in your country. Bring us up to today.
Well, in the beginning, I was very, very, optimistic, and I was happy to find brothers and sisters in every city. I was willing to testify. Many of the churches, or most, if I can say most of the evangelical churches, asked me to go and share my testimony, because I was at that time somehow well-known person.
Is that through your music?
Yeah,
and things
music.
Like you're
yeah. Through music, we became a well-known band.
So you're telling me you're famous?
I was kind of famous.
How about that?
Okay.
That's a unique part of your life, I guess. That I can see what's happening here. So if you're a well-known face and then you become a Christian, you're probably that's true. They're probably asking you to come share your story, your testimony. Okay.
And I was glad to do that. I was willing to do that. I thought it was my calling.
That's unique.
To do that, and then after that, share, give my testimony or share the gospel. But I started to realize that Christians and churches and pastors and preachers were saying they were not living these things. They were more and more compromising their truth when they were speaking during the years. And it was obvious why was happening this. So the Western mentality of capitalistic ideal of materialism, driven by a materialistic perspective, entered in Albania with the missionaries in the early 90s. So the Albanians now, our people wanted to be more wealthy and more and more and more. So, and that their lifestyle started to, to be like the Western life. So I thought that would, with the coming of the years, that would be a more and more distinction between church and the non-believers in Albania. But it didn't happen. In fact, instead happened that the church was adapting the cultural element of the world, other than, reflecting a life that is obedient to a king who gave his all, and he died poor, and he was not at all aggressive, and his mission was totally different in this life that all of the rest of the world. So, but on Sunday, that was during the day, from Monday to Saturday. On Sundays, the preaching was the same. So I realized more and more going in churches, in different churches, because I had the possibility to go everywhere, almost everywhere. I realized that. And it started to concern me a lot. Even in our own church, it happened, this. So I was like, what's going on, another disappointment is in the horizon. So we had hypocrisy in communism time. We have hypocrisy, a lot of hypocrisy in a democratic type of society. But how can we accept hypocrisy in the church, which is the light of the world, and then is following the one who is the truth and the life? So, and the way. So it started me to concern. And I was in a seminary, in theological seminary in Albania. When they gave me an assignment paper for a book titled "The Reformers and Their Stepchildren," by Leonard Verdun, and then there I read about the Anabaptists of the 16th century, and I was like, it was interesting because the seminary was, and it is, Reformed seminary.
Okay.
So
that is interesting.
I don't know if they did a good job giving me that book, but
I'm curious why they assigned that book if they're Reformed.
Well, the idea was, I have to honor that. The idea was that, okay, we have to be careful aligning too much on the state.
Oh,
because we can.
Sure.
You see the mistakes in the past.
So you'd been in seminary. I mean, I don't know. You got a seminary degree then, I guess, after you became a Christian, or you just
in
studied
Albania, you don't need a seminary degree.
Oh, okay.
It's not totally different.
Sure.
You go there and you take classes. In fact, I started my interest was about biblical languages.
Oh, sure. Greek. Interesting.
And then I was interested in other classes, like in historical theology. I liked a lot. And that book was in this.
Okay, that makes sense.
Assignment for this class. So the book was for. I mean, the assignment was for of this paper was for this topic of not to align too much to the state, or what happened if you align too much with the state and then mingled Christianity with the state. But now I was informed about this group of radicals 500 years ago. So I left a little bit, I left aside the assignment, and I started to be interested in these people. Who are these people? Why they did what they did? It seemed to me they were connected to the Church of the New Testament and the first. I didn't know too much about the Christians in the first and second and third century, but of course the Church of the New Testament. So it was alike. And so I found this, it was a spark for me. And it was a little light for me at that time that, probably I'm headed in a wrong path. So I need to be interested and take a turn in my life. And so that's how I started to have a lot of interest on the Anabaptist history, theology, and practice, and then from there we ended up in starting a church with these convictions, which they are not Anabaptist convictions; they're biblical convictions. But following trying to follow the principles and practicals of the first century, second century, third century Christians, and of those Christians like Anabaptists or even others, who time by time they have shown the importance of the kingdom of God, kingdom mindset of the church. So that's we started in our neighborhood with the kids of our neighbors, with kids camps, and the first day that we opened the door for a kids camp in summer 2015, 70 kids show up.
Oh.
And we said, what are we going to do now?
That's a lie.
But somehow we managed that. Yes. And then we met with their parents, and then we continue this way, serving, learning at the same time. And we are a group of people who are doing the same thing, trying to practice what they even though there are challenges that are presented by the commands of God in everyday life, challenges in marriage, challenges in parenting, in family, things that we never thought before, because it was like, okay, we have eternal security. We want to serve God, but still, we can interpret many of the commands. We have this way out of saying, hey, this is not for this time. This is cultural. This is, theological. We have this command has different viewpoint theologically. So let's take the ones that it seems to us fits better. Instead, that was that interpretation who challenged you at who challenged you not the most, and that was the way of living a Christian life. Now we're trying to see His commands in order to follow Him as Lord and King, to see the commands face to face, at least, saying that, hey, it's not easy, this, but at least not to turn the back to His commands, because where He is, there where our life lies. So there where we find meaning, there where we find joy and peace after passing that challenge through faith. So yeah, that's where we are now as a group.
So as I'm reflecting on what you shared with us today, I'm thinking of the people listening to this that are maybe questioning, or they're on a journey of, is Christianity real? Is God even real? Kind of like what you went through, searching. Is there something more here? What would you say to those people who may be in a similar spot as you were back those years ago, where it's like, I'm not sure God is real? What would you say to them?
Well, if I turn my eyes on the past and see my journey, I was sharing this with a brother here in yesterday. If I look back, it is a journey of a creature that is used not to accept the existence of God, of the Creator, just because it doesn't feel well, in the beginning. I'm still struggling with it. Not the existence of God is 23, 24 years now that I'm convinced about that. But the real existence of Him, when He asked me, to follow Him in a certain path that I don't like, because of my ego, because of my pride, and because He asking me, to be humble in that and then to follow Him. So I would say to these people, try to humble yourself, and then you'll see that not only God exists, but He will make possible that you will be attracted so much to Him that you will follow Him then, no matter that you will not want too much to follow Him, It would be so much truth and power that you will see in your life, overcoming things that you never thought that you would do such a thing. You would be released by chains that, I'm talking about addiction, I'm talking about, from, the thoughts and the deeds and actions, you will be released, and you'll experience that power. That in the next step, look what will happen. In the next step, you will not want to do that, but still we will do it because you have already experienced that power. And then it's the only journey with God that matters. It's not the best, but it's the only one that matters, that gives meaning to a life of a human creature. So that's what I've seen in. And now I have difficulties, accepting things. I told to that brother yesterday. Yeah, we were sharing, and I don't like. I say, God, I don't like this. I don't want this. This is too much for me. And then still, I'm so amazed, and so His presence is so meaningful that I still do that. I go after Him. So this is priceless.
Well, Saimir, thank you for sharing with us. It's quite a journey you've been on, and I think there's a lot for us to think about from what you've told us today. Yeah, it's been wonderful to know you and get to know you more over the last couple of years, and I'm excited to see where the next few years take you, especially with this church and the things you've been doing, the ministry you've been doing in Albania. I want to bless you in that. So thank you for sharing with us today.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode with Saimir. If you found this interesting, you should check out the interview we did with Yuri Kravitz, who came from the former Soviet Union in Ukraine, and it's his story of how they came to America and what that journey was like for him. Also, if you're interested in European history in general, we're doing an entire documentary series on the origins of Anabaptism, and that's its own separate YouTube channel. Make sure and subscribe to that to not miss those documentaries when they come out. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.